All right, here we go. All right, my mom's going to be reading now. Isaiah 10 to 12. She'll be reading from her NIV translation. I'll be reading from my Septuagint. All right, here we go. Go ahead, Mom. All right, my mom's going to be. Go ahead, Mom.
Woe to those who make unjust laws, to those who issue oppressive decrees, to deprive the poor of their rights and rob my oppressed of justice, making widows their prey and robbing the fatherless. What will you do on the day of reckoning when disaster comes from afar? To whom will you run for help? Where will you leave your riches? Nothing will remain but to cringe among the captives or fall among the slain. Yet for all this, the anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised. Woe to the Assyrians, the rod of my anger, in whose hand is the club of my wrath. I send him against a godless nation. I dispatch him against a people who anger me, to seize, loot, and snatch plunder, and to trample them down like mud in the streets. But this is not what he intends. This is not what he has in mind. His purpose is to destroy, to put an end to many nations. Are not my commanders all kings, he says? Has not Calno found like Conchamiah? If not Hamath like Arpad, and Samaria like Damascus? In my hand seized the kingdoms of the idols, kingdoms whose images excelled those of Jerusalem and Samaria. Shall I not deal with Jerusalem and her images as I dealt with Samaria and her idols? When Yahuwah has finished all the work against Mount Zion and Jerusalem, he will say, I will punish the king of Assyria for the willful pride of his heart and the haughty look in his eyes. For he says, by the strength of my hand, I have done this, and by my wisdom, because I have understanding. I removed the boundaries of nations. I plundered their treasures. Like a mighty one, I subdued their kings. As one reaches into a nest, so my hand reached for the wealth of the nations. As men gather abandoned eggs, so I gathered all the countries. Not one flapped a wing or opened its mouth to chirp. Does the axe raise itself above him who swings it, or the saw against him who uses it? As if a rod were to wield him who lifts it up, or a club brandish him who is not wood. Therefore, Yahuwah Almighty, will send a wasting disease upon his sturdy warriors. Under his pomp, a fire will be kindled like a blazing flame. The light of Israel will become a fire, their set apart one, a flame. In a single day, it will burn and consume his thorns and his briars. The splendor of his foreign and fertile fields, it will completely destroy, as when a sick man wastes away, and the remaining trees of the forest will be so few that could write them down. In that day, the remnant of Israel, the survivors of the house of Jacob, will no longer rely on him who struck them down, but will truly rely on Yahuwah, the set apart one of Israel. A remnant will return. A remnant of Jacob will return to mighty Yahuwah. Though your people, O Israel, will be like the sand by the sea, only a remnant will return. Destruction has been decreed overwhelming and righteous. Yahuwah Almighty will carry out the destruction decreed upon the whole land. Therefore, this is what Yahuwah the Almighty says. O my people who live in Zion, do not be afraid of the Assyrians who beat you with a tool and lift up a club against you as Egypt did. Very soon my anger against you will end, and my wrath will be directed to their destruction. Yahuwah Almighty will lash them with a whip, as when he struck down Midian of the rock of Oreb, and he will raise his rod over the waters, as he did in Egypt. In that day, their burden will be lifted from your shoulders, their yoke from your neck. The yoke will be broken because you have grown so fat. They enter,
Having problems seeing.
they enter Aiah, they pass through Migron, they store supplies at Michmash, they go over the pass and say, we will camp overnight at Gelba, remain trembles. Gibeah of Saul bleeds. Cry out, O daughter of Galini. Listen, O Lasha, for Anathorphai. Madamenai is in flight. The people of Gaham take cover. This day they will be built in Nob. They will shake their fists at the mount of the daughter of Zion, at the hill of Jerusalem. See, Yahuwah Almighty will lop off the boughs with great power. The lofty trees will be felled, the tall ones will be brought low. He will cut down the forest thickened with an axe. Lebanon will fall before the mighty one. Okay, chapter 11. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots, a branch will bear fruit. The spirit of Yahuwah will rest on him. The spirit of wisdom and of understanding. The spirit of counsel and of power. The spirit of knowledge and of the fear of Yahuwah. And he will delight in the fear of Yahuwah. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge duty. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness his sash around his waist. The wolf will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat. The calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear. Their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the hole of the cobra, and the young child put his hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on my set apart mountain. For the earth will be full of the knowledge of Yahuwah as the waters cover the sea. In that day, the root of Jesse will stand as a barrier for the peoples. The nations will rally to him, and his place of rest will be glorious. In that day, Yahuwah will reach out his hand a second time to reclaim the remnant that is left of his people from Assyria, from Lower Egypt, from Upper Egypt, from Cush, from Elam, from Babylonia and Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah. But the four quarters of the earth, Ephraim's jealousy will vanish, and Judah's enemies will be cut off. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, nor Judah hostile toward Ephraim. They will swoop down on the slopes of Philistia to the west. Together they will plunder the people to the east. They will lay hands on Edom and Moab, and the Ammonites will be subject to them. Yahuwah will dry up the gulf of the Egyptian sea with a scorching wind. He will sweep his hand over the Euphrates River. He will break it up with 7 streams so that men can cross over in sandals. There will be a highway for the remnant of his people that is left from Assyria, as there was for Israel when they came up from Egypt. Chapter 12. In that day, you will say, I will praise you, O Yahuwah. Although you were angry with me, your anger has turned away, and you have comforted me. Surely Elohim is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. Yahuwah is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. With joy, you will draw water from the wells of salvation. In that day, you will say, give thanks to Yahuwah, call on his name, make known among the nations what he has done, and proclaim that his name is exalted. Sing to Yahuwah, for he has done glorious things. Let this be known to all the world. Shout aloud and sing for joy, people of Zion, for great is the set-apart one of Israel among you. Yeah, those are beautiful chapters. Oh,
No kidding. That was amazing. And that's what we get to look forward to, right?
isn't it? You're right, sister. Beautiful thoughts. I love to think, I forget where in Isaiah it is, but we're going to be taught the law. That's the precious thing that I hold on to. I think, right now I feel like I'm in a rehearsal, I'm trying to rehearse this stress rehearsal as best I can, but he's going to teach me on that mountain the law. We could not possibly have a better teacher.
Yep. What I like about Isaiah 10 is that this is a very good chapter, especially when people ask me, because multiple times the topic of Joel 2:32 has come up, and this universal interpretation of everyone who calls upon his name will be saved.
Yeah.
Isaiah 10 completely destroys that interpretation, that extremist interpretation. Okay, so if that's the case, why is there a remnant? Okay, Yahuwah has predestined the amount of people that he's going to save. He's predestined who is going to even be grafted in among the Gentiles. Like my mom's NIV of Romans 11 would say, the full number of the Gentiles should come in. There's a specific amount of Gentiles Yahuwah is going to graft into his people, and that's it. So what I mean by this is that there's
when it says that, like your mom, I don't want to get off because I'll forget.
okay.
Your mom, there's a number of Gentiles. So when that number, I was taught this, so could be wrong. When that number arises, then that's when Yahuwah will sound the trumpet or not. Have you heard that?
Scripture doesn't say, but I would definitely say that I don't think either way Scripture says. So it could be possible. It's possible that that's the case, but it's not. I'll put it this way. Scripture doesn't say that it's a requirement for him to come. But what Paul's talking about actually in Romans 11 says is the prophecy in Genesis 48. Paul's directly quoting from Genesis 48:19, and he's talking about the seed of Ephraim. See, Ephraim is, for the most part, the house of Ephraim, the house of Israel is where all the Gentiles are going to be grafted into for the most part. If you don't have any ethnic
natural Israelite blood in you, like me and my mom, for the most part, we don't. We could have like a little bit because I'm Sicilian, but anyway, but for the most part, me and my mom most likely will be grafted into Ephraim. Just for the fact that we're Roman born, we're not Israelite born. So
There's a segment of my
so
history that we
So-
don't even know about.
yeah, we don't even know how much mixed my mom is. My mom, I'm mixed from my dad's side, mostly Sicilian, so I have a little bit of like Hamite in me. Um, but as far as it doesn't matter anyway, because him, he's not of Shem's line anyway, so it doesn't matter. But the point is that that Romans 11 doesn't really it's not giving you a timetable that he has to return as soon as that number gets filled, but it is saying that there is a predestined number Yahuwah has. Not every heathen is going to be grafted in. There are going to be heathens that are predestined to destruction. And that's just how it goes. Like Yahuwah's predestination works both ways. His election works both ways. Okay, he has elected some people to salvation. He's elected the majority of the world, the rest of the world, to be instruments of wrath, as Paul talks about in other chapters of Romans. I think Romans 14 or something like that. He talks about the potter of Jeremiah. Yeah. So Paul gets into all that, how predestination and free will work together and all that, and how Yahuwah has every right to predestine certain vessels of wrath if he wills. He's the creator. But what I wanted to show from Isaiah 10 from what my mom read is that a lot of people get this verse, they take Paul's verse out of context that all of Yasharal shall be saved. And they say, well, see, every Israelite's going to be saved. No, that's not what Paul's saying, because Paul will be contradicting the prophet Isaiah here. Isaiah clearly says that there's going to be certain individuals of Israel that will be saved. Because if we go up here to Isaiah 10, let's see, starting in verse 20, it says, it shall come to pass in that day that the remnant of Yasharal shall no more join themselves with, and the saved of Jacob shall no more trust in them that injured them, referring to the Gentile nations that, hurt them, afflicted them, abused them. But they shall trust in the set apart one of Yasharal in truth. Again, this goes to the proper context of what Joel 2 is talking about. It's not just about knowing the pronunciation of the Father's name. It's about knowing who he is. You're trusting in him. Etc. And the remnant of Jacob shall trust on the mighty Elohim. And though the people of Yasharal be as the sand of the sea, so it says, even though at one point they were as the sand of the sea, a remnant of them shall be saved. So Yahuwah 2 times in this book of Isaiah, he keeps reiterating, not all of ethnic Israel is going to be saved. He keeps saying that for a reason. Okay, he will finish the work and cut it short in righteousness, because Yahuwah will make short work in all the world. So again, you being an ethnic Israelite does not make you automatically the seed of Abraham, is what I'm trying to say. People have misunderstood scriptures from Genesis 12 and gotten this, like they think it's about a bloodline. It's not about a bloodline. It's not at all. Yahuwah will predestine some of every nation, tribe, and tongue. He's going to predestine individuals from every nation, tribe, and tongue to be his people, but the majority of the world is not his people. That's why there's going to be way more tares than wheat, if that makes any sense. The majority of the world is going to be tares. Okay, so when we look at Yahuwah's idea of predestination, it's very clear. It has nothing to do with bloodline. It has nothing to do with you being a physical descendant of Abraham. Yahusha even rebukes the Pharisees for this. He knows they're physical descendants of Judah. He's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. You're spiritually children of the devil. You do what the devil desires. You're just like your father, the devil. So Yahusha is not even acknowledging. He's basically saying to them, it doesn't matter what your blood is. Who cares? Why does that matter? That's what he's trying to get the point across to them, is like, what you think, the intentions of your heart and your works is what matters. You could be a descendant from Enoch, but if you live like Cain, what does it matter?
Yeah.
Like that's what he's trying to get the point across. But anyway, just ended my tangent there. But I know a lot of people get misunderstood in Romans 11 when it says all Yasharal shall be saved, but then they don't read other of Paul's letters that says that not every Israelite is of Israel. I'm paraphrasing here, but that's basically what he's saying. Not all of Israel is of Israel. So again, Paul, when he's talking about all Yasharal shall be saved, as the scripture says, and he's quoting from one of the prophets, he's referring in the context of the remnant. He's not referring to every ethnic born Israelite of every tribe is going to be saved. That's ridiculous. In my opinion, that's ridiculous to think that, because there's so many scriptures in the prophets. If you read all the prophets like Malachi, Micah, Nahum, or I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, it's probably Nahum. But you read all of the prophets, they all talk about a remnant shall be saved, a remnant shall be saved. It's never every, child of Abraham is going to be saved.
Can I just ask a question on chapter 11? I was just noticing this as I was reading. He will reach out his hand a second time to reclaim the remnant that is left of his people and all these various places. Now, is that referring to the second coming?
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be referring to also, you have, that I would think that's referring to the second coming, but it could be separate, because we see in the Brit that the Brit Hadashah says that he's using his messengers, not his right hand. So technically that could be separate. Yahusha himself could be, it could be talking about him bringing the 144,000 to a place of safety. Maybe that's what that prophecy in Isaiah is talking about, versus the second coming event itself, where he gathers his elect from the four corners of the earth. So it seems
I think he's talking about the end of the age, like right now, because look at all the people he's calling right now.
Oh, okay.
That's what I think.
Okay. Yeah. I know it's confusing, because there seems to be two different gatherings in the end times, because you have one that happens exactly at his second coming, and then it seems like there would be one briefly before that with the 144,000. Obviously the 144,000 in the wilderness would have to happen before his second coming. So them being gathered into the wilderness would have to kind of be separate from the gathering of his second coming. So it does seem like there's two separate events of gathering his people, that he's got, the greatest in the kingdom, the 144,000 will be gathered first before his second coming and all of that. So yeah, good point. But Isaiah 11 too, there's a lot of tube stuff here, a lot of good stuff here. I still don't see how people today don't see that this is Yahusha that is being talked about. I really don't get that. The fact that it literally, the spirit of counsel and strength, spirit of knowledge, righteousness shall fill him. The spirit of Elohim shall rest upon him, spirit of wisdom and understanding. The spirit of the fear of Elohim, he shall not rightly rule according to appearance, nor reprove according to report. Now, again, that a normal human, I have yet to see a normal human not judge according to appearance at least once in their life.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure some of us, we try our best today not to do that, but it seems like this prophecy is talking about a being that will never judge according to appearance. I can't think of a mortal that's done that. Just saying. But he shall rightly rule the call of the Lord. Yeah.
Okay, so you think it's like an immortal person because they see beyond and spiritually, versus we have eyes of flesh.
Yeah, I would say that mainly because Yahuwah himself speaks of himself in that same character. He says, I judge which is in the hearts, you judge according to the flesh or the outside. And he speaking to Samuel, and he's saying, yeah, you or whoever was he was choosing to go find David that day when he anointed him. And Samuel's looking at these big strapply brothers of his, like the muscular guys and all that. And Yahuwah sees like little meekly David. He's not looking on his appearance. He's looking inside of him in his heart. And he's saying, I choose him. So I really think that's in my opinion, a point to the oneness of who this person actually is. And that this is, Yahuwah in the flesh that is talking about here. And in my opinion, because we see the only person in scripture that is ever characterized as someone that never judges according to appearance, that is the Father. I have yet to see any other being not screw up and judge according to appearance. I've done it tons of times in my life. I not even realizing it. I've messed up and did it. Judging according to appearance, judging by the way someone dresses or some way someone acts or appears from the outside, the outer appearance. So I can't think of even a mortal prophet at any point in time that has not screwed up at least once and done that by mistake. I have yet, I don't know, could be wrong, but I think there's something divine that Yahuwah is trying to point us to there, that this is not a normal mortal. And he shall have the loins girded with righteousness and his sides clothed with truth. This points also to us spiritually. We need to be like him and, have the breastplate of righteousness and all that, and what's interesting, this is talking about Yahusha in a millennial context. This is really important. When you witness to Jewish people, you got to bring this up. What is the context of this? Was this supposed to be the first coming of the Mashiach, or was this supposed to be the second coming? Some Jewish people understand this concept. They call it Messiah ben Joseph, Messiah ben David. The problem is that when Yahusha first came, the Pharisees and all of them, they wanted Messiah ben David at the first coming instead of Messiah ben Yosef. Messiah ben Yosef is like the meek type of Mashiach. He's the characteristic of Yahusha, where he's the suffering servant, was supposed to come first before the conquering king, before the actual king of the lineage of David would come in the second coming. See, that's where the disconnect in mainstream Judaism is today, in modern Judaism, even though, and they don't even want to believe in a divine Messiah. Oh no, that's way too much out of the question. But anyway, that's the major thing you got to explain to them there, is that in that chapter, it's a whole millennial context. In Isaiah 11, it's talking about the wolf shall feed with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the kid, the baby goat. The lion shall feed together, and the little child shall lead them. And the ox and the bear shall feed together. Mind you, this has to be a millennial context, because in modern day, this would not be happening. This would not be happening in a modern time where these animals would not be in peace with one another. A wolf and a lamb would not be in peace with one another. A leopard and a baby goat, I doubt you would see them lie down together in modern day. Okay. The ox and the bear shall feed together. Their young shall be together, and the lion shall eat straw like an ox. And an infant shall pull his hand. You definitely can't say this is the time of his first coming. An infant shall pull his hand down the hole of a snake and the nest of young asps and not get harmed. So the context is that the baby's hand would not be harmed. They shall not hurt, nor shall they at all be able to destroy anyone on my set apart mountain, for the whole world is filled with the knowledge of Yahuwah, as much water covers the sea. So the whole context here, this is all future context, end times context. The fact that the Pharisees did not realize this, it's shocking to me. They must have been extremely blinded by Yahuwah that they did not see all this, because it's clearly a millennial context. And in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, he that shall rise to rule over the Gentiles. In him shall the Gentiles trust, and his rest shall be esteemed. Now, I remember the Masoretic changed this verse. What does it say, Mom? It kind of just says that the Gentiles will trust in Yahuwah's name or something like that. Or
the nations will rally to him, and his place of rest will be glorious.
So they leave out that in him shall the Gentiles trust, which is pretty big, because that's showing a grafting in concept, number one. Number two, it's showing that we see this later on fulfilled in the New Covenant scriptures, commonly called the New Testament, that his own people were rejecting him for the most part. I mean, you had some individuals accepting him, but a lot of the Yahudim were not accepting him, but the Gentiles trusted in him. So that's, to me, that's a big part of that messianic prophecy, that the Masoretes decided, oh no, we're not going to have that phrase in there. No, let's get rid of that. And it shall be in that day, Yahuwah shall show his hand to be zealous for the remnant that is left of the people, which shall be left by the Assyrians. Key, left by the Assyrians. This, I don't think this might have been more or less like this might be a little bit prior to the second coming, because the Assyrians are supposed to oppress them. I think it's before the second coming that happens. If I remember, the book of Micah talks about it, parallels with this. It talks about the Assyrian in my land, and all that, and from Egypt, from the country of Babylon, from Ethiopia, and from the Elamites, and from the rising of the sun, and out of Arabia. Something's telling me this connects with the Gog-Magog war. Something tells me there's something connecting with that. I remember Ethiopia is supposed to be attacking the land when the Gog-Magog war happens. So that's something I want to look more into, the timing of that verse. He shall lift up a standard for the nations. He shall gather the lost ones of Yasharel. Technically, this is partially fulfilled when he comes. What does he do? His first coming, he says, I am not sent, but the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So technically, this is partially, not fully, but partially fulfilled in his first coming. He's telling his disciples, even don't go to the Gentiles first, go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel first. So technically, this is partially fulfilled in a way in his ministry, in his human ministry. And he shall gather the dispersed of Yehuda from the four corners of the earth. So obviously there's still some of this to be future, but the lost sheep of the house of Israel, I think, definitely plays some part in that prophecy. What he was doing in the Brit Hadashah times. The envy of Ephraim shall be taken away. Okay. Yahuwah shall make desolate the sea of Egypt, shall lay his hand on the river with a strong wind. He shall smite the seven channels so that men shall pass through it dry shod. So that definitely seems like it's talking about the second Exodus right there. So that this is a prophecy about the greater Exodus. And there shall be a passage for my people that is left in Egypt, and it shall be to Yasharel as the day when he came forth out of the land of Egypt. So was there anything that struck out to you, Mom, in chapter 12, or was there anything that before we move on? I know 11 was really important.
Yeah. Not really. It's like, a jubilation, almost like a psalm,
Yeah, it's similar. It's similar to the Song of Masha. It reminds me of that.
Yeah.
Isaiah 12. It's talking about, I will trust in him and be not afraid, for Yahuwah is my splendor and my praise, and has become my salvation. You know how Exodus 15 talks about Yahuwah is the Elohim of my father and my savior.
Yeah.
Draw ye therefore water with joy out of the wells of salvation. You know how Yahusha talks about, the woman at the well.
Yeah.
And he says, the water I give you.
Mm-hmm.
And in that day you shall sing to Yahuwah, call aloud, call upon his name, proclaim his esteemed deeds among the Gentiles, make mention that his name is exalted. See, this is what his people are supposed to be doing. A lot of his dispersed ones were supposed to be proclaiming his name to the Gentiles, which obviously has not been done. Very few of us know of his name. Sing to praise the name of Yahuwah, for he has done great things. Declare this in all the earth. Exalt and rejoice, you that dwell in Zion, for the set apart one of Yasharel is exalted in the midst of her. So obviously this is a future context, dwelling in Zion, The set apart one is in the midst of her. I find it very interesting. They use the word in the Greek, the midst of her. I wonder if that same Greek word is used in the Brit Hadashah, where Yahusha says, 2 or 3 gathered in my name, I'm in the midst of them. So find it very interesting there. So a lot of oneness stuff, in my opinion. So very interesting. But let's see here. I think we got one more portion left, actually. So
John chapter 20.
John, yeah, I think it's John 20. I think it's not, I don't think John 20 is that long. We might as well just keep it on this recording and have you read it just to kind of save a little bit of time here. Because I don't think it's that many verses anyway. All right, so John chapter 20. Go
The
ahead.
whole chapter?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I thought we had. done
Yeah,
last
we,
week. Okay, no
we-
problem.
we might,
No
well,
problem.
it kind of overlapped this week. It was the same portion.
Okay, no problem. Okay, chapter 20. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary of Magdala went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Yahusha loved, and said, "They have taken my master out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter, who was behind him, arrived and went into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the burial cloth that had been around Yahusha's head. The cloth was folded up by itself, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from scripture that Yahusha had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to their homes, but Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw 2 angels in white, what's that word?
Robe.
Yeah, white robes where Yahusha's body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my master away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Yahusha standing there, but she did not realize that it was him. "Woman," he said, "why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Yahusha said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Yahusha said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet returned to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am returning to my Father and your Father, to my Elohim and your Elohim." Mary of Magdala went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Master." And she told them that he had said these things to her. On the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jews, Yahusha came and stood among them and said, "Shalom be with you." And after he said this, he showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Master. Again, Yahusha said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." And with that, he breathed on them and said, receive the set-apart Spirit. If you forgive anyone his sins, they are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven. Now Thomas, also called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Yahushua came. When the other disciples told him that they had seen the Master, he declared, unless I see the nail marks on his hands, and put my finger where the nail was in his side, I will not believe it. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Yahushua came and stood among them and said, Shalom be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands? Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Thomas said to him, my master and my Elohim. Then Yahushua told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Yahushua did many other miraculous signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not recorded in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Yahushua is the Messiah, the son of Yahuwah, and that by believing you may have life in his name.
So,
That was beautiful and how touching, because when Mary stood by the tomb and she was weeping, that is so emotional, because they loved the Savior. He was everything to them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. And so, it was, it's touching to even hear it be read again and again, and, wow, can you imagine if we were in that time? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
How awesome that'd be, Yeah, so it's like,
I often think of Mary, Yahushua's earthly mother, who really was not that relationship at this point. But to a mother, he will always be her son. Do you know what I mean? Like when you bear a child and you care for them and whatnot. And I've often thought, the terrible mourning that she had, and just horrible. But you know what? Her baraka is that her mourning only lasted 3 days. And then she was able to see him again. I don't know, maybe because, us mothers, we think of these things, but that's crossed my mind.
Yeah. What's very interesting is if you look at the word day, the Greek word for day of the week is probably not supposed to be day of the week. From what I've looked at the Greek here, it's actually Sabbaton. To explain why it would be referring to a Sabbath is because during the week of unleavened bread, you have 2 Sabbaths, right? So historically, that week you would have had 2 Sabbaths preceding one another. You would have had a high Sabbath and then the weekly Sabbath after that. So technically, Yahushua rose at the end of the weekly Sabbath. So it makes sense that it says, on one of the Sabbaths came Mary. It's actually how it should read in the English, rather than the first day of the week or on a Sunday. Some translations even paraphrase Sunday, which is ridiculous. I'm like, first of all, they were not calling that day Sunday yet. Number one, even if it was the first day of the week, they would not be calling it Sunday. But anyway, the Greek, they try to say the Greek means first day of the week. I just respectfully disagree with that. Just from looking at the lexicons of the Thayer's and the Strong's Concordance, it's Sabbaton. So Sabbaton, the majority of the time, that same Greek word's used in the Septuagint is for the Sabbath. So if they're using the same Greek language to make the New Testament along with the Septuagint, they're not, a word doesn't change definitions. So that's where Christian tradition comes in. So anyway, I believe he rose towards the end of the weekly Sabbath, the second Sabbath. That's why it says one of the Sabbaths she came. So she was probably walking, towards the end of the Sabbath. And technically, she's not breaking the Sabbath by walking to a tomb towards the end of the Sabbath. So I know there's a lot of people that don't want to accept that it could have been a Sabbath. She's walking to the tomb because they say that's breaking the Sabbath. No, that's they could walk on the Sabbath. Yahusha walked with his
Absolutely,
disciples
yes.
plucking grain on the Sabbath. So you're telling me she couldn't walk to a tomb on the Sabbath?
Of course she could.
And technically, there's no commandment. I know some people with the whole ceremonial uncleanness thing, they try to say, well, why would she walk to the tomb at the end of the Sabbath? Well, first of all, being ceremonial unclean, there's no commandment in the Torah that says you can't be ceremonial unclean during the Sabbath. There's no, Yahuwah never says that. So, like, for example, if a brother or sister wanted to go to a funeral for a loved one on the Sabbath, that's not a violation of Torah. Just FYI. So I know a lot of people get this weird idea that you can't be ceremonially unclean on his set apart days. When he's talking about not being unclean in Numbers 9, he's talking about people that are offering sacrifices. Even though it doesn't mention it in Numbers 9, I believe it's talking about Levites in Numbers chapter 9, because it literally talks about they could not offer their offerings for the Passover. And the Passover sacrifices, obviously the Levites have to do that. So a lot of people take that verse from Numbers 9 and get this weird idea that it couldn't have been a Sabbath for Miriam to come to the tomb. But I don't see any contradiction there, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but I do believe she was walking there towards, the sunset. The second half of that weekly Sabbath, she was walking towards the tomb. I don't see a problem with that. Like I said, there's no violation for them walking in general on the Sabbath. There's no violation of that. Yahushua and his disciples did that all the time, and Yahushua even healed people on the Sabbath. So just saying, unless she's buying something on the Sabbath, that's the only way we could say, honestly, that she would be violating something, because some people say she bought spices and stuff, but it doesn't say she bought spices when she's walking over there to the tomb. So again, that's like in my opinion, is a assumption at best to say that that would violate Torah for her to walk to the tomb. If she's just walking to the tomb to see the dead body, there's no violation against that in Torah, from what I understand. So anyway, that is, from what I've read, I haven't seen a direct violation where Yahuwah says you don't do that. So anyway, but that's the end of today's readings. Let me see here. So I think that's about it. So hopefully you guys got something out of this, all of our viewers and listeners out there. Thank you for joining us for today. That concludes today's Torah portion. Please stay tuned. Yahuwah willing, we will be coming back next week for our next Torah portion. And please stay tuned as Yahuwah guides me and gives me time to compile these studies I'm compiling right now. We'll be getting some new topical studies to you right now. I've been working on a book of Exodus comparison between the LXX and the MT. So please stay tuned. I will be recording that soon, Yahuwah willing. So anyway, Shabbat Shalom.